Hello my friend and welcome to Historian Sleepy Channel. Tonight we step into a wilderness where the trees groan under snow, rivers hide beneath pale sheets of ice, and every breath becomes a little cloud that immediately regrets leaving your lungs. You're following the narrow trail of a mountain man as evening settles over the high country and the temperature begins sliding toward -30 degrees Celsius. It is the kind of cold that stiffens leather, freezes wet hair, and makes metal objects feel personally hostile. You probably won't survive this unless you learn quickly, listen carefully, and resist the modern instinct to complain when your heated seat takes too long to warm up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from, along with your local time. Perhaps you are warm in bed, while your imaginary moccasins are already filling with snow. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge beneath darkening spruce trees, placing one fur-wrapped foot ahead of the other, while the forest absorbs nearly every sound. Snow presses against your ankles, then your shins, and occasionally your knees when the crust collapses without warning. Each step requires a small negotiation with the landscape. The ground promises support, you trust it, and then you sink like a disappointed dumpling into powder. The cold does not arrive as one dramatic enemy. It works patiently. First, it nips at your cheeks. Then it creeps through the seams of your mittens and settles around your fingertips. Your nose begins to feel carved from wood. The moisture from your breathing freezes along your scarf and beard, creating a delicate fringe of white crystals. It looks impressive, almost heroic, although you mostly resemble a badly frosted shrub. Ahead of you walks an experienced trapper, his shoulders rounded beneath a heavy wool coat and a patched buffalo robe. He wastes no energy. His stride remains short and steady, never hurried. Because sweat is dangerous here. A person who overheats beneath thick clothing soaks the fabric closest to the skin. Once movement stops, that dampness begins stealing warmth with ruthless efficiency. You learn that survival in deep winter is partly the art of remaining comfortably uncomfortable. The trapper reads the country while walking. He notices which branches carry fresh snow and which have been shaken clean by wind. He studies small ridges where powder forms curled lips along the edges. These shapes reveal the direction of recent gusts. He watches loose crystals skitter across open patches like tiny silver insects. You see snow. He sees a moving record of the weather. Mountain men of the 19th century fur trade often travel through vast regions with few marked roads and no reliable forecasts. Many depend on memory, local knowledge, indigenous guidance, and careful observation of the land. The famous Rocky Mountain Rendezvous system begins in 1825, allowing trappers to exchange furs for supplies at yearly gatherings rather than returning east. For months between those gatherings, however, a man may rely on what he carries, what he finds, and what he's been wise enough not to lose in a creek. Your own gear feels heavier with every mile. A rifle rests across your shoulder, a powder horn and shot pouch knock softly against your side. Blankets, dried food, spare moccasins, tools, and small personal items ride in the packs carried by the animals behind you. Nothing is light, yet nearly everything has a purpose. Even a simple metal cup may become a cooking vessel, a drinking cup, a scoop, or, during a particularly miserable morning, something you stare into while reconsidering your career choices. The animals move carefully. Their breath rises in thick clouds, and ice clings to the longer hairs around their mouths. Horses and mules provide mobility and carry equipment, but they also create problems. They require food, shelter from severe wind, and protection from predators. Snow hides holes that can injure a leg. Ice can turn a shallow crossing into a trap. You're not merely guiding them through the wilderness. You're constantly judging whether the route is safe enough for every living creature in the group. The trail bends toward a broad opening between the trees. At first, the open ground looks inviting. Travel would be easier there, and the snow appears smoother. The trapper stops before entering. He lifts a mittened hand and waits. A gust sweeps across the clearing, lifting powder into a low white veil. The exposed space offers no protection. Wind strips away the thin layer of warm air surrounding the body, making already dangerous cold feel even harsher. A calm temperature of -30 is brutal. Add a steady wind, and uncovered skin can freeze far more quickly. The clearing is not a shortcut. It is a refrigerated hallway designed by nature, with absolutely no concern for customer satisfaction. You turn instead toward thicker timber. The route becomes slower, but the trees break the wind. Snow lies unevenly beneath their branches, with shallow pockets near trunks and deeper drifts where gusts deposit loose powder. You begin understanding that the easiest-looking path is not always the safest. In winter, convenience often arrives wearing a very suspicious smile. The trapper pauses near a pine and presses a bare thumb briefly against the bark. He examines the trunk, the direction of the branches, and the snow piled around the roots. Trees can help reveal prevailing winds. Snow tends to collect on sheltered sides, while windward surfaces may appear scraped or crusted. You start looking for these patterns yourself. Soon the forest no longer seems silent or blank. It is speaking constantly, although in a language made of frost, bent grass, snapped twigs, and drifting powder. Above the western ridge, the sun sinks into a haze of pale gold. Daylight disappears quickly in the mountains, where steep slopes can hide the sun long before the sky becomes fully dark. You feel the urgency, but the trapper does not rush. Panic wastes strength and encourages mistakes. He simply adjusts the route, aiming toward lower timber where the land folds away from the wind. Time matters now. Travel must end early enough to prepare for darkness, yet stopping too soon can leave you in poor terrain. The group needs shelter, fuel, water, space for animals, and some warning of approaching weather. Finding all of these together is less like selecting a campsite, and more like interviewing the forest for a job it does not know it has applied for. You watch the sky through the branches. Thin clouds stretch across the fading blue, their edges softening as the light weakens. A ring around the moon can suggest ice crystals high in the atmosphere and may precede changing weather, though such signs are never perfect predictions. Experienced travelers combine many observations rather than trusting a single omen. The wind, clouds, animal behavior, snow texture, and falling pressure all contribute pieces to the puzzle. A small flock of birds moves rapidly through the trees, feeding before night. Their quick movements suggest the ordinary urgency of winter rather than a approaching catastrophe. But you notice them anyway. The wilderness trains attention through consequences. Ignore enough details, and eventually one of them becomes the detail you desperately wish you had noticed. Historians still argue whether many mountain men possessed highly systematic weather knowledge, or whether later stories exaggerated their ability to predict storms with near-magical accuracy. Some undoubtedly became exceptional observers after years outdoors. Others were probably just as surprised by sudden weather as anyone else, though perhaps they complained with more colourful vocabulary and fewer indoor witnesses. A quirky belief sometimes attributed to frontier travellers is that certain animal behaviours could forecast severe conditions. Beavers reinforcing lodges, squirrels gathering heavily, or birds feeding frantically might be interpreted as warnings. Modern science treats such signs cautiously, since animals respond to immediate conditions and seasonal rhythms rather than issuing personalised weather reports. Still, when you're several days from shelter, Even a nervous squirrel begins to look like a qualified consultant. The snow changes beneath your feet as you descend. On the open slope, it was hard and wind-packed. Under the trees, it becomes softer and deeper. In one hollow, the air suddenly feels sharper. Cold air flows downhill and collects in low places, creating pockets that may become colder than nearby slopes. The trapper notices this immediately and climbs several yards higher. You follow, discovering that a tiny change in elevation can make a meaningful difference. You look back into the hollow. It appears peaceful, sheltered, almost perfect. Yet its stillness is deceptive. A camp there could become a basin of bitter cold by midnight. You begin to understand why experience matters more than appearance. The wilderness is beautiful, but it has no obligation to be honest. Your thighs ache from lifting your legs through snow. The straps across your shoulders feel narrower with every step. Hunger sharpens the smell of the dried meat tucked away in a pack, though eating must wait until travel ends. You flex your fingers inside your mittens and wiggle your toes, checking that sensation remains. Numbness is a warning. Pain may be unpleasant, but at least pain is still sending messages. The trapper glances at your face. Frost has formed around the edges of your scarf. He tells you to keep moving your jaw and cheeks. You obey, making expressions that would ruin any dignified frontier portrait. The movement encourages circulation. Vanity, you quickly learn, freezes long before the rest of you. A faint cracking sound comes from the woods to your right. Everyone stops. The horses lift their heads. For a moment, the forest seems to hold its breath with you. Then a burdened branch releases its load of snow, which crashes harmlessly to the ground in a soft explosion. The trapper relaxes. You do too, although you pretend you are never worried. Somewhere inside your coat, your heart has clearly attempted to join the fur trade on its own. The route now follows the side of a wooded rise. The slope blocks much of the wind, and clusters of spruce grow close together. Their lower branches form dark spaces above relatively shallow snow. These places may offer protection, but they also require inspection. Dead limbs can fall, snow-heavy trees can shed entire loads, thick brush can conceal uneven ground. A good winter traveller does not simply seek shelter. He tests it. You notice tracks crossing the slope, small paired prints from a snowshoe hare. Farther down, a line of deeper impressions suggests deer. Animal trails can reveal firm roots through snow, water sources, and natural passages between obstacles. They can also lead into tangled cover or steep ground. You follow only while the route agrees with your other observations. The last daylight fades from gold to grey. Shadows merge between the trunks. The cold intensifies as the sun's warmth disappears, although it never offered much warmth to begin with. Your breath grows louder in your ears. Leather creaks. Snow squeaks beneath your feet, a sound often associated with very low temperatures because dry. Cold crystals resist sliding smoothly past one another. That squeak is not comforting. It is the forest's polite way of confirming that tonight intends to be difficult. The trapper finally slows near a shoulder of land protected by a rise and surrounded by mature timber. From here, the ground descends gently toward a frozen stream, close enough to provide water, but not so close that damp air and low-lying cold dominate the sight. The trees offer fallen branches, standing dead wood, and protection from the strongest gusts. The snow is deep enough to insulate, yet not so deep that every movement becomes exhausting. You stand still for several seconds and immediately feel the cold searching for openings in your clothing. Movement has been producing heat. Now that heat begins fading, the lesson is immediate and severe. Reaching a place to stop does not mean safety. It only means the next set of decisions can begin. The trapper studies the trees, the slope, the snow, and the darkening sky. You watch his eyes move from one detail to another. Nothing is chosen casually. At -30, a poor decision made in 5 seconds may demand 5 miserable hours of correction. Behind you, the animals shift under their loads. Ahead, the forest waits in blue shadow. Somewhere beneath the snow, the stream murmurs faintly under its roof of ice. Night settles over the mountains, quiet and enormous, while you stand at the edge of your first true test. The trapper lowers his pack but does not release it completely. One strap remains hooked over his shoulder while he examines the ground, ready to move if the place proves deceptive. You imitate him, though your knees would prefer that every decision from this point onward involves sitting down. The wooded shoulder seems protected, but seeming protected is not enough. You stand quietly and listen. Wind brushes the treetops with a low rushing sound, yet only a faint current reaches your face. The slope is doing useful work, lifting the main force of the air above the camp. A few yards toward the ridge, branches toss and shiver. Here, the smaller twigs barely move. You loosen your scarf for a moment and turn your cheek toward different directions. Exposed skin detects weak air currents better than thick cloth. The northern side feels slightly sharper, so you step toward a wall of closely spaced spruce. Their lower branches overlap like rough shingles, creating a natural barrier. Snow beneath them remains soft rather than polished, another sign that strong gusts rarely scour this pocket. The protection cannot be complete. A hollow sealed too tightly by trees may trap smoke once a fire is burning, leaving everyone coughing and blinking through the night. You need shelter from the wind, but you also need enough open air for smoke to escape. Apparently, even in the wilderness, finding accommodation means checking the ventilation. You move slowly around the potential camp, pressing the butt of a wooden staff into the snow. In some places, it sinks nearly to your knee. In others, it stops against buried stones or fallen branches. The surface looks level, but the hidden ground is lumpy and slanted. Snow has performed the frontier version of placing a beautiful rug over a damaged floor. A suitable sleeping area must be broad enough for the men, their gear, and safe movement around a fire. Too steep a slope causes bodies and loose equipment to slide downhill. A slight incline can help melting snow drain away, but anything stronger becomes an icy mattress with opinions. You stamp several places and watch how the packed surface settles. Near the spruce wall, the ground feels firm and gently raised. The trapper points upward. You tilt your head and inspect the canopy. A heavy dead branch hangs above one promising spot. It is thick, pale, and stripped of needles. Snow has accumulated along its upper surface. Cold can make wood brittle, while wind or shifting weight may bring the branch down without much warning. Such branches are sometimes called widowmakers, a name that manages to be both practical and deeply unhelpful at bedtime. You move away from it. Another tree leans toward the clearing. Its roots have lifted part of the frozen soil, leaving a dark hollow near the base. The trunk still carries green needles, but its position is unstable. A camp should not sit beneath leaning trees, cracked trunks, or branches burdened with excessive snow. Fire heat may also loosen snow overhead, producing sudden showers of slush and ice. You prefer your evening water to arrive in a cup, not directly down the back of your coat. You circle a cluster of mature spruces and examine their trunks. One has a long vertical split. Another bears shelves of fungus, suggesting decay within the wood. A third stands straight and healthy, its roots gripping the raised ground. The trapper taps each trunk with the handle of his hatchet. Solid wood answers with a firm knock. Rotten wood gives a duller sound. No single test offers certainty. You use sight, touch, sound, and common sense together. The safest campsite is rarely obvious from one glance. It reveals itself through the absence of problems. No dangerous limbs, no strong wind, no hidden basin, no unstable slope, no animal den, no obvious flood mark. It is less a perfect paradise, and more a place that has failed to threaten you in several different ways. The frozen stream lies below the camp, close enough for collecting water. You approach it carefully, stopping where the bank begins to dip. Snow can hide thin ice along the edges, especially where moving water prevents a solid freeze. Even at extreme temperatures, currents may keep channels open beneath a brittle crust. You do not step onto the stream. Water can be obtained from clean snow or by opening a controlled access point from secure ground. Falling through ice would soak boots and clothing, turning an ordinary cold night into an emergency. Wet wool still retains some insulating ability, but drenched garments at -30 are not a survival strategy. They are an aggressively bad idea wearing trousers. The stream also marks the lowest ground nearby. Cold air tends to settle along such channels, and dampness can make the chill feel more penetrating. You climb back toward the raised shoulder, satisfied that water is available without placing the sleeping area directly beside it. During the Rocky Mountain fur trade, waterways shape much of a trapper's movement. Beaver live in rivers, creeks, ponds, and marshes, so trapping parties often follow drainage systems deep into mountain country. Water routes guide travel and provide drinking water, yet winter camps must balance access with the hazards of ice, flooding, damp ground, and concentrated cold. You notice a line of debris caught several feet above the present stream bed. Twigs, dried grass, and bark cling to shrubs in a tangled band. It suggests that water rises during warmer seasons or sudden thaws. The stream is locked in ice now, but a campsite chosen for repeated use should sit above flood level. Mountain weather can change quickly, and ice jams can redirect water in surprising ways. The trapper studies the opposite bank, where willows form a dense thicket. Their branches provide some fuel, but the tangle may also shelter animals. Tracks stitch the snow near the water. Most belong to hares and small rodents. A larger print appears near a fallen log, softened by drifting snow until its shape is uncertain. You crouch without touching it. The mark may belong to a cat, a wolf, or merely a melted dog track left by another traveller. The trapper does not waste time turning it into a dramatic prophecy. One print does not define the entire area. He looks for repeated tracks, droppings, disturbed snow, remains of prey, and trails leading toward cover. No fresh signs suggest a large predator is denning nearby. Still, food will need to remain secured and separated from the sleeping place. Animals are not villains waiting for a theatrical entrance. They are hungry residents investigating unusual smells. From their perspective, you have arrived carrying dried meat and astonishing confidence. A shallow depression appears beneath the roots of an overturned tree. The exposed root mass forms a wall taller than your shoulders. It blocks wind beautifully, and the hollow beside it seems almost designed for shelter. The trapper approaches but stops several paces away. You examine the root wall. Frozen soil and stones cling between tangled roots. If warmed by a nearby fire, chunks may loosen and tumble down. The fallen trunk could also shift if supporting snow melts unevenly. Natural features can be useful, but they must be treated as structures with weaknesses rather than gifts placed conveniently by the forest. You choose a location beside the root wall, not directly beneath it. The feature can break some wind while remaining far enough away to avoid falling debris. This small adjustment preserves the advantage without accepting the greatest risk. Much of wilderness judgment works this way. You rarely eliminate danger completely. You arrange the camp so that several manageable risks do not combine into one disastrous surprise. The animals need their own suitable ground. You lead them into a sheltered stand of trees where the snow is shallow enough for them to move. Their packs come off carefully, preventing sweat from chilling beneath straps. You check the surrounding branches for sharp stubs that could tear hide or equipment. Tether lines must not become tangled around fallen wood. Horses may paw through snow to reach buried grass, but deep winter forage is unreliable. Trapping parties often carry limited feed or seek places where wind has exposed vegetation. The needs of pack animals influence every campsite decision. A spot comfortable for people may be useless if the animals cannot stand safely. Find forage, or avoid the full force of the wind. A quirky frontier habit sometimes involves watching where animals choose to rest. Horses naturally turn their hindquarters toward cold wind and seek protected ground. Some experienced travelers treat their behavior as another clue when judging shelter. The animal is not performing a scientific survey, of course, but it has no interest in pretending a miserable location is charming. One horse stands calmly near the spruce wall. Another keeps shifting and facing uphill. You follow its gaze and find snow occasionally spilling from branches above. The movement and soft impacts make the animal uneasy. You relocate the tether point a few yards away, where the canopy is lighter and the ground remains protected. The available fuel receives careful attention, though you do not gather it yet. Standing dead trees offer wood that is often drier than fallen branches buried in snow. Dead lower limbs beneath thick evergreens may also remain protected from precipitation. You identify several sources within easy walking distance. A camp that consumes every nearby branch in one evening creates extra labor and longer trips into darkness. You estimate whether enough fuel exists to maintain warmth without exhausting yourself. The cold makes every task cost more energy. Carrying wood through knee-deep snow at midnight is particularly expensive, both physically and emotionally. You also check the distance between fuel and camp. A dead tree should never be felled toward the sleeping area or animals. Chopping too close to camp scatters chips and creates trip hazards beneath the snow. The work zone needs space, clear footing, and a safe direction for falling timber. Historians still argue whether popular accounts exaggerate the lone mountain man as a completely self-sufficient wilderness expert. Many trappers operate in organized companies, travel with partners, learn from indigenous communities, and depend on shared labor. Solitary figures certainly exist, but cooperation often provides the margin between hardship and catastrophe. That cooperation is visible as the group quietly divides the remaining decisions. One man checks the animals, another studies the fuel supply. The trapper inspects the camp perimeter. You continue probing the ground, finding a buried stump directly where someone might step away from the fire in darkness. You mark it with an upright branch. Several more hazards receive the same treatment. A half-buried log could catch an ankle. A concealed hole beside a root could twist a knee. A patch of smooth ice near the slope could send someone sliding toward the stream. None appears dramatic in daylight, but fatigue and darkness transform minor obstacles into traps. The camp gradually takes shape without a single wall being raised. You know where bodies can rest, where animals can stand, where fuel can be processed, where water can be approached, and where waste should go. Separate zones reduce confusion and keep sparks, hooves, food, and sleeping people from competing for the same patch of snow. You scrape away a small layer of powder and find old needles beneath it. The ground smells faintly of resin and damp earth. This raised patch has not collected much ice. Spruce trunks surround it on 3 sides, while the 4th side opens enough to let smoke drift away. The trapper finally drops his pack. You lower yours with a long, grateful breath. The sight is not warm, because nothing here is warm. It is not comfortable, because comfort has become a very ambitious word, yet it is stable, protected, supplied, and thoughtfully arranged. Darkness gathers between the trunks as each person begins working within the chosen space. The wind continues rushing across the ridge, but down among the spruces it reaches you only as a soft, cold whisper. The forest has not become friendly. You have simply found a place where its sharpest edges pass at a distance. The first hatchet stroke lands with a flat crack that carries through the trees. Frozen wood answers differently from summer timber. It is harder, sharper, and less forgiving, as though the tree has spent the entire winter becoming personally offended by tools. You begin with the driest fuel available. Fallen branches lying directly on the snow look convenient, but many have absorbed moisture or become sealed inside ice. Better wood hangs beneath evergreen limbs, stands dead among living trees, or rests above the ground where air has moved around it. You snap a thin branch in your mittened hands. It breaks cleanly instead of bending, and the exposed center looks pale and dry. That clean break matters. Damp fuel wastes precious heat while water turns to steam. It smokes heavily, catches slowly, and may smother a weak flame. At -30 degrees, the fire cannot begin as a casual pile of random logs. It must grow in deliberate stages, from the smallest fibers to wood thick enough to burn for hours. You crouch beside a sheltered patch of packed snow and remove one mitten. The cold immediately bites your fingers, so every movement becomes precise. From a small pouch, the trapper takes dry tinder protected inside cloth. It may include shredded inner bark, fine grass, plant fibers, charred fabric, or wood scraped into delicate curls. The bundle looks insignificant, almost laughably small, yet the whole night depends on it. Keeping tinder dry is one of the quiet disciplines of wilderness travel. A person may carry it close to the body, seal it in a horn or pouch, or collect resinous material during the day. Birch bark, when available, contains oils that help it burn even when the outer surface is damp. Pine resin also catches readily and produces a strong flame, though it can spit sparks and coat tools with a sticky reminder of its enthusiasm. You search beneath a fallen pine and find a knot of hardened resin. It smells sharp and sweet when scraped. Thin shavings curl from it beneath the knife. They join the tinder bundle, where they will help the first flame survive the shock of the cold air. The trapper hands you a length of dead branch and shows you how to split it. The outside feels damp from snow, but the interior is dry. You place the branch on a stable block and strike it with the hatchet. The wood divides along the grain, exposing clean surfaces that will ignite more easily. Soon you have several groups of fuel arranged by size. The finest pieces are thinner than matchsticks. The next are about as thick as fingers. Larger splits lie nearby, followed by heavy logs that will not be useful until the fire has developed a strong bed of coals. This careful sorting feels excessive until you imagine searching for proper kindling while a tiny flame dies in front of you. Preparation prevents that miserable little performance. A fire is not impressed by confidence. It prefers dry material placed at the correct moment. The snow beneath the chosen fire area must also be managed. A blaze built directly on deep powder may melt downward, sinking into a wet pit. Logs can shift, steam can rise, and surrounding snow may collapse into the flames. You stamp the surface firmly, then lay several green poles side by side to form a platform. Their fresh wood will resist burning long enough to support the young fire. In some conditions, travellers expose bare earth or build upon flat stones. Stones taken from wet ground or a stream can crack when heated, so they must be selected carefully. Trapped moisture expands into steam, and a bursting stone near your face is a dramatic way to discover that geology has opinions. The wooden platform keeps the first flame above melting snow. It also allows air to pass beneath the fuel. Fire requires heat, fuel, and oxygen. Lose any one of those, and the flame fades. The principle is simple enough for a school book, yet maintaining all three in a winter forest demands constant attention. The trapper kneels with his back toward the faint wind. He opens a small metal box containing flint, steel, and a piece of char cloth. Striking steel against the sharp edge of flint shaves off tiny particles of metal. These particles heat and spark, landing on the charred fabric. Flint and steel remain common fire-starting tools for many early 19th century travellers. Matches exist in experimental forms during this period, but dependable friction matches do not become widely available until later. A mountain man cannot simply pull out a cheerful little box from the general store and strike one with theatrical ease. He must carry reliable materials and practice until the motion becomes routine. The steel snaps against the flint. A brief spark appears, then vanishes. Again, this time, a red point glows in the char cloth. The trapper folds it carefully into the tinder bundle and raises it near his mouth. He blows with slow, controlled breaths. Too little air, and the ember weakens. Too much, and fragile tinder scatters into the snow. Smoke curls upward. The bundle begins glowing from within, orange light spreading through the fibres. Then a small flame lifts from the bark. It is no larger than a candle flame, but every person watches it. You place the finest wood over it in a loose cone. The pieces touch the flame while leaving gaps for air. The resin catches with a bright, quick flare. Another curl of bark ignites. You add 2 more twigs, resisting the urge to bury everything beneath a heroic armful of logs. A common fire-building mistake is adding heavy fuel too early. Large wood absorbs heat faster than a weak flame can produce it. The result is smoke, frustration, and several men staring at a dead pile as though disappointment might ignite it. You feed the flame patiently. Thin twigs begin snapping. Their blackened ends glow red. Finger-thick pieces go on next, arranged across the small cone. Heat gathers, and the flame rises high enough to touch them. The sound changes as the fire strengthens. At first, it whispers. Then it crackles. Moisture trapped in the wood hisses and pops. Resin pockets flare briefly, releasing sparks that drift into the darkening air. You hold your hands near the flame, but not too close. Fingers numb by cold can burn without immediately feeling the damage. Rewarming must be gradual. The return of circulation brings aching and prickling sensations, unpleasant but welcome signs that the hands remain alive and useful. The fire is still fragile. A gust could bend the flame away from the kindling, while falling snow could cool the center. You place a temporary screen of green branches several feet upwind, careful not to crowd the blaze. The screen reduces sudden drafts without trapping smoke. Some trappers also carry small pieces of pitchy wood known as fat wood. It forms where resin concentrates in pine stumps, roots, and branch joints. Even years after a tree dies, these resin-rich sections may burn fiercely. A sliver can smell like turpentine and light with remarkable eagerness. It is nature's emergency candle. Although nature neglects to include a warning label about the smoke, you split a resinous knot into narrow sticks and reserve several pieces. Using all of them at once would create an impressive flare and then leave nothing for a difficult morning. Survival depends as much on restraint as abundance. The growing fire receives wrist-thick splits. You lean them against one another, allowing the center to breathe. Flame wraps around their edges. Black surfaces form, then crack, revealing orange beneath. A second man begins preparing larger logs. He cuts lengths that can be moved safely and positioned without disturbing the core. Wood is never thrown onto the fire. A careless impact can scatter coals, collapse the structure, or send sparks into blankets and clothing. You use a forked branch to adjust one burning stick. The tool keeps your mittens away from direct heat and prevents you from sacrificing a perfectly good sleeve. Wool resists flame better than many modern synthetic fabrics, but it can still scorch. Fur, leather, and grease-covered clothing can also catch or smoulder. Clothing worn near frontier fires often acquires tiny holes from sparks. A trapper may patch blankets and garments repeatedly, carrying the scent of smoke wherever he travels. That smell becomes part of winter life, mixed with leather, horse, pine resin, and the faint aroma of someone who has not encountered a proper bath in a socially ambitious amount of time. Historians still argue whether surviving descriptions of mountain men overstate their casual toughness around winter fires. Memoirs and later tales often celebrate men who sleep lightly dressed beside open flames. But practical experience suggests that sensible travellers use every available layer and treat fire as support rather than magic. A blaze can fail, fuel can run out, and weather can shift. The structure now changes from an ignition fire into a heating fire. Instead of a narrow cone, heavier pieces are laid more broadly, creating a stable base. The goal is not merely tall flame. Bright flames are useful for starting wood and boiling water, but lasting warmth comes from a deep bed of coals and thick logs burning steadily. You add 2 split logs parallel to each other, leaving a channel between them. Smaller burning wood rests in the center. The arrangement guides heat upward and allows air to enter from the ends. As the outer surfaces char, they reflect heat inward. The trapper watches the smoke. Thick white smoke suggests moisture or incomplete burning. Dark smoke may indicate resin, bark, or fuel starved of oxygen. A cleaner, nearly invisible stream usually means the wood is burning efficiently. He shifts one log slightly, and the fire brightens at once. It seems almost alive, but its behavior follows physical rules. More air reaches the coals, combustion strengthens, and heat rises. You're not commanding the flame. You're arranging conditions so it can do what flame naturally does. Fuel collection continues while enough light remains to distinguish solid wood from rotten wood. You carry armloads back to camp, placing them in separate stacks. Thin kindling stays closest to the fire, but beyond the reach of sparks. Medium pieces form another pile. Heavy logs rest farther away, aligned so no one trips over them. Some fuel is placed beneath cover to protect it from new snow. A few damp pieces sit near the warmth, where they can dry gradually. They are not leaned directly over the flames, where sudden ignition could create a dangerous collapse. The quantity required surprises you. A small cooking fire uses little wood. A fire expected to provide meaningful heat through a severe winter night consumes far more. The group gathers several times what seems necessary, because cold hours stretch longer than optimism predicts. There is an old camp habit of measuring the woodpile against the night. When you think you have enough, gather twice as much. The advice sounds exaggerated until darkness deepens and every nearby branch has already been collected. Then it begins sounding like wisdom carved upon the human soul. The blaze settles into a strong rhythm. Flames rise without racing. Thick wood catches along its edges. Coals accumulate underneath, glowing through a thin crust of ash. You stand on the side opposite the smoke and feel heat against your coat. One half of your body warms while the other remains cold, producing the classic wilderness experience of being roasted and refrigerated at the same time. The fire is not left unattended. One person remains near it while others work. Sparks are watched. Shifting logs are corrected. Snow is kept nearby for emergencies, though dumping it onto a healthy fire would create steam and scatter ash. A shovel, green branch, or boot can control small escaped embers. The surrounding area is cleared of loose needles, dry bark, and hanging branches. Winter snow reduces wildfire risk, but it does not eliminate it. Dry material beneath trees can still ignite, and sparks may lodge in rotten wood. Responsible campcraft protects both the people and the forest supporting them. Night fully closes around the clearing. Beyond the glow, the trees become black columns beneath a starless sky. The fire paints nearby snow in shades of gold, amber, and deep blue. Steam rises from damp wood stacked near the edge. The horses shift quietly in their sheltered space. You add one heavy split to the coals. It catches slowly, exactly as intended. The center glows brighter, holding enough heat to ignite the next piece when the time comes. Your shoulders loosen for the first time since stopping. The cold still waits beyond the circle of light, vast and patient, but the camp now possesses a steady heart. It crackles low among the trees, fed by dry wood, careful hands, and the stubborn human refusal to spend the night as a decorative ice sculpture. You push a boot into the snow and begin clearing a shallow rectangle beside the warmth. The work looks simple until the crust breaks unevenly and your foot disappears into a softer pocket. Each step compresses the surface, revealing roots, stones, and ridges hidden beneath the white layer. A sleeping place cannot merely look flat. It must become flat enough that your ribs are not negotiating with a buried branch at 2 a.m. The trapper uses a wooden shovel and the broad side of his snowshoe to scrape away loose powder. He does not remove every trace of snow. Packed snow can form a useful foundation if it is kept dry and covered with enough insulation. Bare frozen earth may be colder than the snow above it, since snow traps air within its crystals and slows the movement of heat. You stamp the rectangle until it becomes firm. The edges rise slightly, forming a shallow platform. A narrow channel remains around it so melted snow can drain away, instead of collecting beneath the bedding. Even in severe cold, heat from bodies and nearby flames can soften the surface over several hours. A bed that begins level may become a damp bowl unless water has somewhere else to go. The frozen ground is one of the greatest thieves in camp. Your body can warm a blanket, a robe, or a pocket of air, but the earth beneath you accepts heat continuously. Direct contact allows warmth to flow downward through conduction. The colder and denser the surface, the faster that transfer can feel. This is why a mountain man does not simply wrap himself in a blanket and lie on the ground like a parcel waiting for delivery. The covering above matters, but the insulation below often matters more. Snow, soil, and stone are all perfectly willing to absorb your warmth without even saying thank you. You follow the trapper into a stand of spruce where he selects low branches from several trees rather than stripping one bare. Each bough carries short, dense needles and springs back when bent. Green branches contain moisture, yet their structure traps air and lifts the sleeper away from the cold surface. They also remain flexible enough to form a layered mattress. The cutting must be careful. Large limbs are unnecessary, and damaging living trees wastes a resource the forest may take years to replace. You trim smaller boughs with a hatchet, leaving the main branches intact. The resin coats your gloves and releases a sharp, clean scent that cuts through smoke and animal musk. Armloads of spruce return to the sleeping area. You place the first layer with the cut ends facing the direction of your feet and the soft tips pointing toward your head. The boughs overlap like roof shingles. This arrangement keeps sharp stems away from shoulders and reduces gaps where cold air can rise. Another layer goes down crosswise. The trapper presses it with both hands, checking whether the branches collapse too easily. Thin bedding may look luxurious when freshly piled, but body weight compresses it quickly. What begins as a soft green mound can become 3 sad twigs beneath your spine. You add more. The pile rises almost to your knee. It seems excessive until you lie across it briefly. Your weight pushes the branches together, reducing their depth by more than half. The needles whisper beneath your coat. A few stiff points poke through, announcing that the mattress requires further diplomacy. You stand again and rearrange the boughs. Thicker stems move toward the bottom. Fine. Flexible tips form the upper surface. The bedding becomes wider than your shoulders and longer than your body. Extra width matters because sleepers shift during the night. Rolling off the insulated platform places part of the body directly against the frozen ground. An unpleasant discovery usually made while half awake and already furious. Spruce, fir, balsam, and pine boughs can all serve as bedding, depending on the region. Balsam is often prized for its fragrance and softness. Spruce needles may be sharper, but dense branches create excellent loft when properly arranged. Travellers use what the landscape provides rather than carrying a botanical shopping list through the mountains. In open country, grass can replace evergreen boughs, dry bunch grass, reeds, sedges, and cattail leaves trap air when gathered into thick layers. The material must remain dry and clean. Grass frozen into the snow is difficult to collect, so experienced travellers may notice promising patches during daylight and gather them before darkness hardens every stem. A bundle of dry grass appears among the supplies, collected from a wind-blown slope. You loosen it carefully and spread it over the spruce. The strands fill spaces between needles and create a smoother upper layer. They also reduce contact with resin, which has already attached 3 twigs to your sleeve and 1 mysterious needle to your eyebrow. The grass smells faintly sweet, like a field remembered in winter. Its pale colour reflects the firelight, and for a moment the bed resembles something almost civilized. Then a beetle crawls from the bundle and disappears beneath a branch, reminding you that wilderness bedding occasionally arrives with existing tenants. Quirky frontier accounts sometimes describe men placing aromatic herbs, sage, or cedar among their bedding. The scent may discourage some insects, mask odours, or simply make the sleeping place more pleasant. Whether every plant works as claimed is uncertain, but a handful of fragrant leaves can improve morale. At -30, morale is a serious resource, even when it smells suspiciously like a cupboard. You inspect the bedding for hidden snow. A single clump trapped beneath the grass will melt from body heat and create a damp patch. Each bough is shaken before use, and the top layer is swept gently with a mitten. Moisture must remain outside the sleeping layers whenever possible. The trapper then brings sheets of bark gathered from deadfall. Bark can form a useful barrier when placed beneath the boughs, particularly on damp soil or crusted snow. Birch bark resists water well because of its natural oils. Thick slabs of dry pine bark can also separate bedding from the ground, though they are less flexible and may crack under weight. Living trees are not peeled for convenience. Removing a wide ring of bark can kill a tree by interrupting the movement of nutrients. Useful bark comes from fallen trunks, dead standing timber, or pieces already loosened by weather. Frontier survival is not improved by destroying every future source of shade, fuel, and shelter within walking distance. You lift one edge of the bough mattress and slide several bark panels underneath. They overlap slightly, forming a rough floor. The bark blocks dampness and prevents the lowest branches from becoming buried in softened snow. It also discourages needles from sinking into the foundation, as weight compresses the bed. The result is not a modern mattress. There are no springs, no stitched cover, and certainly no little label warning that removal is punishable by law. Yet the layered structure performs the same essential task as modern insulation. It traps motionless air and reduces contact between your body and the cold below. Air itself is a poor conductor of heat when it remains still. The branches, grass, and fibres create thousands of tiny spaces where air becomes trapped. Crushing those spaces removes much of the insulating value. This is why loft matters. A thick blanket compressed beneath the body insulates less effectively than the same blanket draped loosely above. Mountain men commonly carry wool blankets, robes, or hides, but natural bedding reduces the burden placed on those valuable items. A blanket used entirely beneath the body cannot protect the chest and shoulders from air moving through camp. By building a mattress from local materials, you preserve portable insulation for wrapping around yourself. You test the bed again, lowering your weight slowly. The spruce bends but does not flatten completely. Grass softens the pressure points along your hips and shoulders. Bark remains firm underneath. The cold does not vanish, but it becomes distant, muted by layers of trapped air. The trapper watches how your body settles. Your shoulder sits slightly lower than your hips, so he adds a small bundle of bough tips beneath it. A bed need not be perfectly level, but the spine should rest without twisting. Muscles already tired from winter travel recover poorly if they spend the night bracing against an awkward slope. A rolled piece of clothing forms a pillow. It is not large. Raising the head too high strains the neck and creates openings around the shoulders where warm air escapes. A modest support keeps the head aligned while allowing blankets and robes to close around the upper body. Some travelers use a saddle, folded coat, pack, or bag of spare clothing beneath the head. A hard saddle may sound miserable, but frontier comfort is measured on a generous curve. Anything that prevents your ear from resting directly on a frozen buckle qualifies as advanced luxury. Historians still argue whether surviving descriptions of elaborate bough beds represent common practice or the habits of particularly experienced travellers. Some men may build thick, carefully layered platforms whenever time and materials permit. Others, exhausted or hurried, likely settle for thin branches, a robe, and the firm hope that morning arrives soon. Skill, time, and circumstance create wide differences. A large trapping party can gather bedding quickly by dividing the labour. A lone traveller must balance the warmth gained against the energy spent cutting and carrying branches. In dangerous cold, however, the work is rarely wasted. A well-insulated bed can reduce heat loss for many hours. You prepare a second platform beside the first. Each sleeper needs enough space to lie without crushing another person's insulation. The beds remain close enough to share warmth and resources, yet separated enough that one restless man does not roll over and convert the arrangement into a wrestling match beneath 6 layers of wool. Loose equipment stays away from the bedding edges. Knives, powder horns, tools, and metal cups are placed where they can be found without being stepped upon. Boots have their own position near the head or inside the sleeping layers, depending on moisture and conditions. Nothing important is abandoned casually on the snow, where drifting powder can hide it by morning. A few fresh boughs are kept nearby for repairs. Bedding compresses during the night and may need to be fluffed. A branch can snap beneath a hip. Grass can shift toward the edges. Having replacement material within reach prevents a sleepy search through dark timber. You run your hands across the completed surface one final time. Sharp stems are removed. Hollow spots receive more grass. The upper layer feels springy and dry. Resin scents the air, and the green needles gleam softly in the amber light. You lower yourself onto the bed with deliberate care. The branches settle beneath you with a long rustle, then grow quiet. Your back remains above the frozen foundation. The cold presses upward, but the layers slow it, holding a thin boundary of warmth around your body. Above you, the dark spruce branches form a high, shadowed ceiling. Beneath you, bark, grass, and evergreen boughs create a small island between living warmth and frozen earth. It is handmade, uneven, fragrant, and far more valuable than it looks. You settle onto the springy platform and reach for the bundle that has been kept dry beneath a folded hide. The straps loosen with a stiff creak. Inside rests the portable part of your shelter. Several wool blankets, a heavy robe, and smaller pieces of fur that have crossed valleys, rivers, and snowfields, because tonight they matter more than almost anything else you own. The first blanket unfolds reluctantly. Cold has made the wool firm, and tiny crystals cling to its outer surface. You shake it gently rather than snapping it hard. Rough handling can send precious warmth into the air by scattering the dry fibers and opening the weave. More importantly, it can also shower your face with frost, which is a poor reward for responsible housekeeping. You spread the blanket across the boughs, allowing its edges to extend beyond your shoulders and hips. Wool beneath the body adds some insulation, though the branches already perform most of that work. The blanket smooths the uneven surface and keeps sharp needles from working through your clothing with the persistence of very small tax collectors. Another blanket remains folded nearby for wrapping. Its fibers trap air within countless small spaces, slowing the escape of body heat. Wool can continue providing some insulation when slightly damp, unlike cotton, which loses much of its warmth and dries slowly. That practical advantage makes wool one of the most valuable materials carried by travellers in cold country. During the North American fur trade, wool blankets become essential trade goods. European and American companies exchange them across enormous distances, and indigenous communities adapt imported blankets to existing traditions of clothing, bedding, and travel. Trappers also rely on them because a blanket can serve as a cloak, sleeping cover, pack wrap, emergency shelter, or padding for an injured animal. The finest blankets are expensive. A mountain man does not treat one as disposable camp furniture. Holes are patched, edges are repaired, and damaged portions may be cut into mittens, leggings, or strips for wrapping feet. A blanket continues working long after it stops looking respectable, rather like an experienced trapper himself. You lift the wool to your face and smell smoke, horse, resin, and the faint mustiness of long use. The scent is not unpleasant exactly, it is simply honest. Nothing in the bundle has been perfumed, pressed, or displayed beneath flattering shop lights. It smells like every camp it has known. The trapper shows you how to arrange the first covering diagonally. One corner reaches toward your feet, another toward your head, and the side corners fold across your chest. This creates overlapping layers without requiring an enormous blanket. The lower corner folds upward around the boots, forming a pocket that limits warm air escaping near the ankles. You lie down and pull one side across your body. The opposite side comes over it. Then the upper corner settles around your shoulders. The wrap resembles a rough cocoon, though the creature emerging in the morning will be considerably less elegant than a butterfly. The wool must remain loose enough to preserve loft. Pulling it tightly compresses the fibers and reduces the air trapped between them. A snug outer fold blocks drafts, but crushing every layer against the body defeats part of its purpose. You want small pockets of still air, not the frontier equivalent of being vacuum-packed. Your coat remains on. Beneath it, layers of wool, linen, leather, and fur protect the torso. Removing clothing might feel comfortable in a warm house, but the winter camp offers no bedroom wall between you and the night. Garments become part of the sleeping system. Certain tight items are loosened. A belt pressing against the waist can restrict circulation. Boot straps drawn too firmly can reduce blood flow to the feet. Neck cloths are adjusted so breathing remains easy. Warmth depends on circulation carrying heat to the hands and toes, so anything that pinches becomes an enemy disguised as tidy dressing. The heavy robe comes next. It takes both hands to lift and spread. The hide is broad, dense, and surprisingly stiff along the edges. Thick hair covers one side, while the tanned skin forms the other. Buffalo robes are among the most prized cold weather coverings available across much of the continent. A well-prepared winter hide carries a dense coat that traps an impressive depth of air. Not all buffalo hides are equal. Animals taken during the cold months possess thicker coats than those taken in summer. A winter robe can be heavy and cumbersome, but that weight becomes comforting once it settles over you. Carrying it through rough country may inspire several unkind thoughts. Lying beneath it makes every one of those thoughts seem deeply ungrateful. The trapper places the fur side toward the body. The long hair creates loft and captures warm air close to the blankets. The skin side faces outward, where it helps resist moving air and occasional drifting snow. In other circumstances, a robe may be positioned differently, especially when used beneath a sleeper. But tonight its thick hair becomes the upper chamber of your layered shelter. You feel the change almost immediately. The blanket warms gradually, while the robe seems to hold the warmth in place. Cold air still surrounds your face, but your chest and legs begin creating their own small climate. The robe's edges need careful arrangement. A gap along the shoulder becomes a narrow chimney through which heated air rises and disappears. You tuck one edge beneath your side, fold another loosely over the chest, and draw the lower portion around the feet. Your nose remains outside. Breathing beneath the robe might warm the face briefly, but it also releases moisture into the fibers. That problem belongs to another cold lesson, and the trapper simply tells you not to disappear completely beneath the covering. You compromise by exposing your nose and eyes, giving the night a narrow view of a deeply suspicious face. A strip of rabbit fur lines the opening around your neck. Small furs are useful for sealing awkward gaps where large blankets refuse to cooperate. Beaver, fox, otter, rabbit, and muskrat skins may serve as clothing or bedding, depending on availability and value. Some pelts are too profitable to use casually, since they represent trade, ammunition, tools, and food. Beaver fur is especially valuable in the early 19th century because European and American hat makers use its dense underfur to produce felt. A prime pelt may therefore be worth far more at market than it seems beside the camp. Sleeping on a stack of valuable beaver skins would be warm, but it would also resemble using your wallet as a pillow during a rainstorm. Buffalo robes circulate widely through trade networks. Plains communities produce expertly prepared hides, often scraping, softening, smoking, and sometimes decorating them. Traders carry robes toward distant markets, while travelers recognize their immediate practical value. The robes are not crude scraps. Many reflect skilled labor and generations of knowledge about hide preparation. You run a mittened hand over the hair. It grows in varied directions and thicknesses. Along the shoulders and neck, it is longer and denser. Near thinner areas, the trapper folds the robe slightly so two layers overlap. Wear, cuts, and stretched patches receive inspection because cold air finds weaknesses with the determination of a landlord inspecting damage. A narrow tear has been repaired with sinew. The stitches are tight but flexible. Sinew, made from animal tendons, can be dried, separated into fibers, and used as strong thread. When prepared properly, it swells slightly with moisture and helps close the holes it passes through. Your modern sewing kit would look offended by the competition. A quirky tidbit from frontier life concerns the occasional belief that sleeping with fur against the body could draw out sickness or restore strength beyond its ordinary warmth. Fur certainly reduces heat loss, which can make an exhausted traveller feel dramatically better. Whether it possesses any special healing quality is another matter. Still, when a buffalo robe saves your toes, it is understandable to grant it a little mythology. Historians still argue whether written accounts accurately represent how widely individual trappers possessed buffalo robes of exceptional quality. Some descriptions come from prosperous traders, military observers, or later memoirs. Poorer labourers may depend on worn blankets, lesser hides, shared coverings, or whatever can be obtained through exchange. Status can be visible in bedding. A man with several thick blankets and a fine robe owns not only comfort but security. He can lend a covering to a companion, protect goods during travel, or trade the item in an emergency. Another man may sleep beneath patched wool so thin that moonlight seems nearly capable of passing through it. The group compares available coverings without ceremony. One person has a heavy robe but only a single blanket. Another carries 2 blankets and a deerskin. Layers are rearranged so no one lies dangerously exposed. Shared survival encourages practical generosity, especially when the alternative is listening to someone's teeth chatter all night like loose spoons in a drawer. 2 sleepers may place their beds close together and overlap robes. Shared body heat warms the enclosed space between them. This is not considered delicate or embarrassing. At -30, personal dignity becomes a small luxury stored somewhere near the bottom of the pack. You test the wrap by rolling gently onto one side. The robe shifts but remains closed across your back. The blanket corner around your feet holds. One shoulder opens slightly, so you adjust the upper fold and secure it beneath your elbow. Nothing is tied tightly around the body. A cord could become restrictive, difficult to release, or hazardous near the flames. Weight and careful folding are enough. The robe rests heavily over the blankets, preventing them from lifting when air moves through the trees. A spare coat lies across your legs. Extra insulation is most useful over areas where blood moves close to the surface and where large muscles produce heat. The torso receives priority because protecting the body's core helps preserve circulation to the limbs. Hands tuck loosely near the chest rather than lying exposed beside you. Your feet receive special attention. A folded strip of fur surrounds the lower end of the blanket, creating additional depth without squeezing the toes. The boots remain dry enough to stay on for now, though their laces are loosened. There must be room to wiggle every toe. The trapper asks whether you can feel them. You move each one deliberately, all present. This tiny inventory becomes a routine. Fingers, toes, ears, nose, sensation, movement, pain, color. A warm covering can create false confidence if one part of the body remains pressed against a cold object or trapped beneath a tight strap. You notice a metal buckle near your ankle and shift it away. Metal conducts heat rapidly and can become painfully cold against skin. Rifles, knives, cups, and tools remain outside the bedding unless there is a specific reason to protect them. The buffalo robe is not a drawer. Despite its impressive storage capacity, snow begins falling lightly through the canopy. Most flakes settle on the skin side of the robe and remain there without melting. You brush them away with a slow sweep. The outer hide shields the wool beneath, and the dense hair holds the warmth you continue producing. The weight encourages stillness. Muscles that have remained tense throughout the evening begin to release. Your shoulders sink into the bows, your knees bend slightly, and the layered coverings settle around every contour. Warmth does not arrive as sudden heat. It gathers in small territories, first across the chest, then around the thighs, then at the feet. The outer night remains severe, but the blankets and robe create distance between your skin and the frozen air. You listen to the low sounds of wool shifting and fur brushing against leather. The materials are simple, but their arrangement is precise. Each layer has a task. The boughs resist the ground. The wool traps warmth. The fur creates depth. And the hide turns aside the searching air. Wrapped inside them, you no longer feel as though you are lying openly in the wilderness. You inhabit a narrow shelter shaped exactly like your body, stitched from trade, animal life, human skill, and the quiet intelligence of many cold nights. The fire is lengthened until its glowing face runs nearly the full distance of your body. Heavy logs rest end to end over a broad bed of coals, creating a low wall of heat rather than a single, bright tower of flame. You lie parallel to it, close enough to feel warmth across your coat, yet far enough that sparks cannot easily reach the robe. Finding that distance requires judgment. Too far away, and the cold occupies the space between you and the flames. Too close, and the outer hair of the robe may scorch while you sleep. Your face feels the heat first, then your knees, then the toes tucked inside the layered foot pocket. The side pressed against the bedding remains protected from the ground, but the side facing away from the fire cools steadily. This is why sleeping beside a long fire is not ordinary sleep. It is a slow rotation performed by a heavily wrapped person with limited enthusiasm. You rest on your side with your chest turned toward the glow. Heat spreads across the front of the robe. The buffalo hair warms, the wool beneath it warms, and the small pockets of air surrounding your body begin to hold that warmth. Behind your shoulders, however, cold presses gently against the outer hide. For several minutes, the contrast feels pleasant. One side is toasted, the other is chilled, and together they almost average into comfort. You have become a frontier sandwich placed beside a very unreliable oven. The trapper places a long green log along the far side of the fire. It does not burn readily. Instead, it helps contain coals and reflects a portion of the radiant heat toward the sleeping area. A low wall of logs, stones, or packed earth can serve a similar purpose. Though every material demands caution, a reflector need not be tall. Heat from an open fire travels outward in straight lines, so a modest barrier positioned correctly redirects some warmth that would otherwise disappear into the forest. The arrangement also protects the coal bed from shifting wind. You hold a hand toward the fire, then raise it slowly. The strongest warmth travels across the height of your torso. Near the snow, the air remains colder. This uneven distribution explains why a raised bough bed feels so valuable. Even a small lift places more of your body in the path of radiant heat. Long fires are commonly associated with hunters, soldiers, indigenous travelers, trappers, and other people sleeping outdoors in cold regions. Rather than sitting around a compact blaze, sleepers stretch alongside a line of burning fuel. The shape distributes warmth across the body and allows several people to arrange themselves along the same heated edge. The exact design varies with timber, weather, group size, and local knowledge. Some long fires use several short logs placed end to end. Others rely on two large trunks burning along their inner faces. A skilled traveller adapts the form rather than obeying one perfect diagram. You notice that the flames are lower now, though. This is intentional. A tall blaze looks impressive, but it sends much of its heat upward and consumes fuel rapidly. A long, glowing coal bed produces steadier warmth. The heavy logs burn slowly along their surfaces, releasing heat across a wider area. The trapper shifts one log with a green pole. Orange cracks brighten through the black crust. A narrow flame curls along the newly exposed wood, then settles. He adjusts the log only enough to maintain an even line of heat. The movement sends several sparks upward. They rise as tiny red points, fade, and disappear among the branches. One drifts toward the bedding and lands on the snow. Another settles on the outer hide near your knee. You brush it away immediately. The spark leaves a dark pinprick but does not penetrate the thick skin. Wool and hide resist brief contact better than dry grass or loose plant fibers, yet neither is invulnerable. Bedding edges remain tucked away from the flames. Stray needles and grass around the sleeping place are cleared, and every ember receives attention. A tiny coal inside folded wool can smoulder quietly. It may produce little flame while slowly enlarging a hole. The smell arrives first, sharp and unmistakable. Anyone who wakes to that scent checks clothing and bedding at once. The trapper tells of a man who dreams that he is standing in summer sunshine, only to wake and discover that his blanket is smoking. It is a charming story until you realize the sunshine was apparently trying to eat his trousers. You position the robe so the hair remains covered near the fire-facing edge. Long fur can singe quickly. The skin side provides a tougher outer surface, and a folded strip of wool protects the most exposed corner. Nothing loose hangs toward the coals. Your rifle lies within reach but away from sparks. The powder horn remains closed and safely positioned. Black powder does not belong beside open flame, no matter how confident the owner feels. A camp that ignores this rule may become very warm for an extremely brief period. Smoke creates another problem. Even with good airflow, a small change in wind can push it across the sleeping area. At first, the smoke arrives as a thin ribbon. Your eyes sting, and the smell fills your scarf. You lower your face, hoping the current will pass. It does not. The cloud thickens until you cough and lift your head from the bedding. The trapper, apparently finding this educational, waits for you to move rather than rescuing you from the obvious. You slide several inches along the bed, escaping the worst of it. Smoke usually follows the easiest path through camp, but mountain winds rarely remain perfectly steady. Cold air moves down slopes, warmer air rises around the fire, and nearby trees create small swirling currents. A sleeping position that remains clear for an hour may suddenly become a chimney. There is an old camp joke that smoke follows beauty. This is convenient because every person can claim to be its chosen victim. It also allows the group to insult whoever is coughing without interrupting the quiet mood. You learn to read the smoke by its first movement. When it bends low toward the bedding, you adjust early. A small change in body position may be enough. If the wind shifts strongly, the entire arrangement may require correction, but unnecessary disturbance is avoided. Rebuilding a winter sleeping place in darkness is not an activity anyone requests twice. The long fire divides the night into zones. Closest to the coals lies a narrow strip of intense heat. A little farther away is the useful sleeping line. Beyond that, warmth fades rapidly. Step several paces into the trees, and the cold seems to close around you at once. This sharp boundary can deceive a tired mind. While lying beside the glow, the wilderness feels almost mild. Stand to relieve yourself or fetch wood, and -30 returns with immediate authority. Your robe opens, trapped air escapes, and the body loses heat far more quickly. You prepare carefully whenever you rise, and the blankets remain folded around your shoulders. Boots are secure, mittens go on. You avoid wandering beyond the illuminated camp where hidden obstacles wait beneath the snow. Returning to the bed requires restoring the warm pocket. You settle into the same hollow in the boughs and fold the robe closed. Cold air trapped inside must warm again, so the first few minutes feel far less comfortable. The lesson is clear. Do not leave the bedding simply because you are bored and curious about a tree. The fire watch changes at intervals. One person remains alert enough to monitor the logs, control sparks, and maintain the coal bed. He need not sit rigidly awake like a guard outside a palace. He may doze lightly, but he listens for collapsing wood and notices changes in heat. A long fire can shift as logs burn through. One end may fall outward. A charred section may roll toward the beds. Coals may spill from beneath the larger pieces. Careful placement reduces these risks, yet the fire still demands supervision. The watch uses a long pole rather than stepping among the coals. He pushes a burning end inward and places a fresh log where heat will catch it gradually. Adding too much fuel at once could create a fierce blaze and a storm of sparks. Adding too little allows the coal line to break into separate cold patches. Your body detects those patches surprisingly well. When the section opposite your feet weakens, your toes begin cooling even though your chest remains warm. A short log is placed across the gap, and the heat slowly returns. You turn onto your other side. The movement is awkward inside the blankets. Your knees lift, the robe drags across the boughs, and the foot pocket twists. For one alarming second, cold air rushes down your back, then the coverings settle, and the chilled side of your body faces the flames. Warmth reaches it gradually, your shoulder relaxes. The side that has been heated now faces away and releases its stored warmth slowly through the layers. By turning at intervals, you prevent one side from becoming painfully hot while the other grows numb. There is no clock telling you when to rotate. Sensation provides the schedule. Too much heat brings prickling discomfort and the smell of warming hide. Too little produces stiffness and a creeping chill. You shift somewhere between these signals, usually while only partly awake. Historians still argue whether accounts of mountain men sleeping comfortably beside open fires describe genuine rest or merely survivable discomfort polished by memory. A veteran might call the night comfortable because he remains warm enough and wakes with all his fingers. A modern traveller may apply a more demanding standard involving mattresses, silence, and a complete absence of smoke in the eyebrows. Frontier journals sometimes mention men waking repeatedly to feed fires or turn their bodies toward the heat. Sleep comes in fragments. Deep rest may last only until a log settles, or the cold reaches an exposed shoulder. Yet those fragments still restore strength. The body learns to rest whenever conditions allow. A quirky practice involves placing a small green stick near the fire as a crude warning marker. If rolling wood reaches the stick, the sound or movement may wake a light sleeper. Other travellers arrange logs so their knots and irregular shapes resist rolling. These methods are imperfect, but perfection is not available in the equipment catalogue. You listen to the long fire as your eyes grow heavy. Each sound carries meaning. A soft hiss comes from moisture leaving wood. A sharp crack marks a resin pocket. A deeper thump suggests a log settling into the coals. The watch recognizes which sounds require movement and which belong to ordinary burning. The flames shrink until only low tongues remain along the black logs. Red light pulses through gaps in the ash. Heat continues crossing the narrow space to your bedding, touching your robe with a steady pressure. You turn once more, drawing the wool close beneath your chin. Smoke drifts upward instead of toward you. Sparks rise vertically and fade. The snow beyond the fire reflects a dim orange glow, while the deeper forest remains still and black. Sleep gathers in brief, warm layers. You drift, wake, shift, and drift again. The long fire breathes beside you, neither tame nor wild, but carefully managed. Its heat rests against one side of your body, while the other side waits beneath fur and wool, ready for the next slow turn. A companion shifts beside you, and the movement sends a small pocket of warm air across the blankets. The sensation is brief but noticeable. In cold this severe, another living body is not merely company. It is a steady source of heat, breath, motion, judgment, and occasionally snoring loud enough to frighten wildlife from the valley. You lie close enough that the edges of two buffalo robes overlap. The arrangement creates a wider chamber of trapped air between the sleepers. Neither person presses tightly against the other, since compressed wool and fur lose some insulating value. Instead, your shoulders remain near, your backs protected by shared layers, and the overlapping covers seal the narrow space where warmth might escape. This closeness is practical rather than sentimental. A person at rest produces roughly the heat of a small lamp, and several people grouped together create a noticeably warmer pocket than isolated sleepers. The difference may not feel dramatic near your face, but beneath the robes it reduces the amount of heat each body must continually replace. Your companion keeps his knees slightly bent. You do the same, reducing the surface area exposed beneath the coverings and protecting the abdomen. Curling too tightly can restrict circulation or create pressure points, so the position remains loose. The two of you fit together like badly packed luggage, functional, awkward, and unlikely to appear in a luxury catalogue. The third man settles on the other side, his bedding touching the shared edge. 3 sleepers create a compact row, each receiving warmth from a neighbour while keeping enough room to turn. The outer positions are colder, so those places may change during the night. A person who has spent several hours along the exposed edge can trade with someone nearer the centre. Such rotation depends on trust. Everyone must wake enough to move without scattering blankets, kicking another man toward the coals, or stepping on carefully stored equipment. The process involves low muttering, stiff limbs, and the sort of cooperation usually absent from heroic paintings. Mountain trapping parties often depend on partnerships and small groups. Men travel together, divide labour, guard animals, maintain equipment, and aid anyone who becomes injured or ill. The popular image of the completely solitary mountain man captures only part of the reality. Many survive precisely because someone else notices a mistake while it is still repairable. You feel a mittened hand tap your shoulder. Your companion checks whether you respond normally. Cold can make a dangerously chilled person confused, quiet, and clumsy. A man who stops complaining entirely may require more attention than one still offering detailed criticism of the weather. You answer with an irritated grunt. Excellent, irritation remains healthy. The group has simple rules. No one wanders away without saying where he's going, and no one takes the last dry kindling without replacing it. No one hides numb fingers out of pride. A companion checks your face for pale patches, and you inspect his ears and nose in return. Exposed skin can freeze without the victim recognizing the change quickly. You notice a white area high on his cheek. It looks waxy against the weathered skin. You point to it, and he covers the spot with a warm mitten. He does not rub it with snow. That old remedy can damage frozen tissue further by scraping fragile skin and prolonging cold exposure. Gentle warming is safer. He thanks you with a nod, which is frontier language for a heartfelt speech lasting 20 minutes. A dog approaches the bedding and circles twice on the packed snow. Its coat is thick with a dense underlayer beneath longer guard hairs. It lowers itself near your feet, nose tucked toward its tail. The curled posture protects the belly and reduces exposed surface area. Dogs accompany many hunting, trading, and traveling communities across North America. They help guard camps, locate game, carry loads in some regions, and warn of approaching animals or strangers. Their value is practical, but companionship also matters during long periods of isolation. The dog presses against the outer edge of the robe. Heat gathers around your lower legs. You shift carefully so the animal is not trapped, and it releases a satisfied sigh. Apparently your bedding arrangement has passed inspection by the only creature present wearing its blanket permanently. Not every dog is invited beneath valuable coverings. Wet fur can carry snow and moisture into the bedding, and an animal startled awake may tear cloth or knock equipment aside. A dry, calm dog is welcome near the feet. A damp dog with ambitious fleas receives less enthusiastic hospitality. A quirky bit of frontier lore claims that the severity of a night can be measured by how many dogs a person needs for warmth. The phrase three-dog night is often connected with sleeping beside several dogs during bitter weather, though the exact origin remains uncertain. Whether anyone seriously uses dogs as a numerical thermometer is doubtful. Still, the animal beside your boots currently reads somewhere between very cold and please do not move. The dog lifts its head suddenly. Every sleeper becomes alert. Its ears point toward the trees, and a low sound forms in its chest. You listen for footsteps, branches, or the padded movement of a predator. Nothing follows. A horse snorts from the tethered area. Then silence returns. The dog continues watching for several breaths, then lowers its muzzle again. It may have heard a falling clump of snow, a small animal beneath the crust, or something too distant for human ears. Its brief alarm reminds you that warmth is not its only contribution. A dog rests lightly, carrying part of the night watch in its senses. The horses stand close together among the trees. They do not lie beside you, of course, despite the interesting architectural challenge that would create. Their bodies still influence camp life. The sheltered grouping reduces individual exposure to wind, while their shifting and breathing provide sound that helps the watch judge whether everything remains calm. Horses generate substantial body heat, but using them as direct shelter is risky. Hooves move suddenly. Tether lines tighten. A frightened animal can injure anyone sleeping nearby. You maintain a safe distance while placing the animal area where trees reduce air movement. One horse turns its hindquarters toward the faint breeze. Another stands head low beside it, sharing the sheltered side. Herd animals naturally cluster in difficult weather, each body helping break the flow of cold air. They understand group warmth without requiring a lecture or a committee meeting, which already places them ahead of many human organizations. The men imitate that efficiency. Packs form a low barrier along the exposed side of the sleeping row. Saddles, wrapped goods, and bundles interrupt small drafts without enclosing the beds completely. No food is placed among them, since the smell could attract animals directly towards sleeping people. Each person keeps essential gear in a known position. The arrangement allows one man to rise without disturbing everyone. Shared warmth is valuable, but constant movement can release it. The person on firewatch slides carefully from beneath the outer robe, and the remaining sleepers close the gap at once. You feel the temperature drop where his body had been. The wool cools rapidly in the empty space. Your companion shifts nearer, and you pull the robe across the opening. In several minutes, the trapped air warms again. This repeated loss explains why a group cannot rely on body heat alone. Companions support the system, but they do not replace insulation, food, or shelter. A hungry, exhausted person produces less useful warmth. A wet person may chill those beside him. Everyone must arrive at the bedding dry enough, fed enough, and capable of contributing. A small ration passes between the sleepers. You chew dried meat slowly, allowing your body to use the fuel through the night. Digestion produces heat, and a modest meal supports continued warmth. Eating an enormous amount can cause discomfort and thirst, so the portion remains practical. The dog watches each bite with the expression of a betrayed business partner. It receives a small piece, swallows without chewing, and immediately resumes negotiations. Warm drinks may also support comfort, but alcohol is dangerous in extreme cold. It can create a false sensation of warmth by widening blood vessels near the skin, increasing heat loss from the body's core. A person may feel pleasantly heated while actually cooling more quickly. The wilderness provides enough deceptive sensations without adding liquid optimism. Historians still argue whether alcohol consumption among mountain men was as constant and reckless as later folklore suggests. Traders certainly transport spirits, and celebrations can become excessive, especially at gatherings. Daily winter survival, however, demands alertness and coordination. A man too drunk to manage his coverings or recognize numbness becomes a burden to everyone nearby. Your companions monitor one another through conversation. The talk remains low and unhurried. A short question tests memory and clarity. Someone asks the name of a river crossed weeks ago. Another asks how many horses stand among the trees. The answers need not be perfect, but confused speech can reveal dangerous cooling. You respond correctly, though the dog remains unconvinced by your counting. A younger man begins shivering hard. Shivering is the body's attempt to produce heat through rapid muscle contractions. It uses energy quickly, so persistent, violent shivering deserves attention. The group adds a spare wool layer across his torso and draws him closer to the center position. His hands tuck beneath his armpits, where major blood vessels and protected body heat help warm the fingers. Another companion checks that his clothing is not tight around the wrists. The goal is gradual recovery, not sudden roasting beside intense flames. You speak to him steadily. His answers remain clear. His shivering begins to ease, and colour returns to his face. No one mocks the problem. Gentle sarcasm is reserved for healthy people, where it belongs. Sharing warmth also means sharing responsibility. One person cannot sleep deeply while others ignore the camp. Watchers rotate. Each man receives some rest and some duty. The dog fills the gaps with alert ears, and the horses provide noisy warnings whenever something unsettles them. Social habits become part of survival. Arguments are settled quickly. Tools return to agreed places. Blankets are not pulled selfishly toward one sleeper. A person who repeatedly steals the robe may wake to discover that his companions have promoted him to the exposed edge. The humour remains quiet, but it keeps fear from dominating the night. Someone complains that the dog receives more space than he does. Another replies that the dog works harder and smells better. The animal thumps its tail once, clearly accepting the verdict. You draw your knees slightly upward and feel the companion beside you breathing in a slow rhythm. The sound joins the low crackle nearby, the shifting horses, and the dog's occasional sigh. None of these noises is loud, yet together they create reassurance. A solitary silence can make every distant branch seem threatening. Group sounds establish a small human territory within the darkness. Someone is awake. Someone will notice if the coverings slip. Someone will hear the animals move. Your safety exists partly in other people's attention. The shared robe rises and falls gently over several bodies. Warmth gathers beneath it. Not luxurious, not complete, but sufficient. You remain an individual with your own cold fingers, sore muscles, and limited portion of blanket. Yet the night is no longer faced by one body alone. The companions, the dog, and the nearby horses form a scattered cluster of living heat beneath the trees. Each breath enters the frozen air and vanishes. Each heartbeat continues quietly beneath wool, fur, leather, and winter hair. Together, you hold a narrow island of warmth while the surrounding wilderness stretches cold and immense in every direction. A faint chill gathers between your shoulder blades, subtle enough to ignore and dangerous enough that you should not. The warmth around you still feels steady, yet the cloth nearest your skin has become slightly damp. Hours of walking, lifting wood, arranging gear, and lying beside heat have drawn moisture from your body. Now that moisture begins moving through the layers, you slip one mitten beneath your coat and touch the shirt at your back. It feels cool rather than wet, but cool is warning enough. Sweat does not need to soak a garment completely to cause trouble. Even a thin film of moisture can carry heat away as it evaporates, especially when cold air enters through an opening. The mountain man beside you notices the movement and asks whether your shirt is damp. You admit that it is. He gives the sort of nod that says you have made a common mistake and will now receive an educational punishment from nature. You loosen the coat slightly around your neck and waist. The goal is not to expose yourself to the cold. It is to let trapped moisture escape gradually while your body remains warm. Air moves through the outer layers, carrying a little vapor away without allowing the inner clothing to cool suddenly. Managing temperature begins long before sleep, but the consequences become obvious when movement stops. A traveller who works too hard beneath heavy clothing may feel comfortable while active. Once he lies down, the heat produced by his muscles fades, leaving damp fabric against the skin. You learn to adjust clothing constantly. A layer opens during hard labour, a scarf loosens while climbing. Mittens may come off briefly when hands become too warm, then return before the fingers cool. The ideal state is warm without sweating, which sounds simple until you are carrying timber through deep snow while dressed like an upholstered cupboard. The cloth at your back begins drying from body heat. You keep the robe closed around your side so warmth remains trapped, but the coat opening allows vapour to rise. A companion checks the fabric several minutes later. It still feels cool, though less clammy. Wool performs better in damp conditions than many other fibres because its crimped structure continues trapping air, and its fibres can absorb some moisture without feeling immediately saturated. This property helps explain why wool clothing and blankets remain so valuable to cold weather travellers. It does not mean wet wool is magically warm. It means slightly damp wool may continue protecting you while you work to dry it. Linen shirts, leather garments, and fur layers each behave differently. Linen can feel cold when damp. Leather stiffens as water freezes. Fur loses loft if its hairs mat together. Every material demands attention, and every neglected patch of moisture eventually submits a complaint. You remove one mitten and inspect its lining. The inner surface is damp from your hand. Leaving it on may keep the fingers warm for a while, but moisture could freeze once the mitten cools. You turn it inside out carefully and hold it near the heat. Not over the flames, not against a burning log, near the heat. The distance matters. Leather can shrink, harden, or crack if dried too quickly. Wool may scorch. Fur can curl and become brittle. A tired traveller who places valuable gear directly beside intense heat may wake to find it transformed into a small collection of oddly shaped regrets. You rotate the mitten slowly. Warm air enters the lining, and a faint thread of vapour rises. Your bare hand remains tucked beneath your opposite arm until the mitten is ready. Exposed fingers cool quickly, so drying becomes a sequence rather than a general removal of everything damp. One mitten dries while the other stays on. One sock receives attention while the other foot remains covered. The method is slower, but it prevents the body from losing heat all at once. Your boots present a more serious problem. The outer leather has collected snow throughout the day, some of it melted near the fire, soaking seams and softening the material. Now the colder edges have begun stiffening. If the boots freeze solid during the night, putting them on may become nearly impossible. You loosen the laces completely and flex the leather while it's still workable. The movement prevents the shape from locking into a narrow shell. Snow is brushed from every seam. The boots are placed where gentle warmth reaches them, toes angled away from sparks. Some travellers keep moccasins or footwear inside their blankets or robes so they do not freeze. The practice sounds unpleasant until you imagine forcing your feet into leather as rigid as carved wood. A slightly chilly boot tucked near your legs is far more welcome than a frozen boot that requires an argument with a hatchet. The trapper removes the soft inner wrappings from his footwear. Strips of wool and dry grass have absorbed moisture from his feet. He spreads them where warm air can pass over both sides. Replacement wrappings come from a protected bundle. You inspect your socks. The heels are damp and the toes feel colder than they should. You pull one sock free beneath the robe, keeping the foot covered by a folded blanket. The skin appears pale but not waxy. Sensation remains, and the toes move normally. A dry sock replaces the damp one. The difference is immediate. It does not produce heat by itself, but it stops the constant cool draw of evaporation. The damp sock joins the drying line, secured so it cannot fall into the snow or drift toward the coals. Frontier footwear often relies on layered systems rather than one thick boot. Moccasins fit flexibly around the foot and may be combined with wool stockings, cloth wraps, dry grass, or additional outer coverings. Such footwear can work well in dry cold but requires frequent attention because moisture passes through thin leather more readily than through modern waterproof boots. Your feet produce sweat even when the air is brutally cold. Each step presses warm vapor into socks and leather. If that moisture cannot escape, it accumulates. By evening, the feet may be surrounded by damp material that freezes quickly once activity ends. The quirky solution of stuffing dry grass around the feet appears in several cold weather traditions. Grass creates extra airspace and can absorb some moisture. It also feels rather like placing your toes inside a bird's nest, though the birds generally receive better ventilation. The dog watches the sock changing with great interest. One damp woolen strip disappears beneath its nose for inspection. You retrieve it immediately. Shared warmth is useful. Shared footwear is where civilized boundaries return. Moisture also collects above your face. Each breath leaves the body warm and saturated with vapor. In the cold air, That vapor condenses and freezes. Frost gathers along your scarf, eyebrows, and the fur near the robe opening. Tiny crystals form where warm breath meets frozen fibers. You feel tempted to pull the blanket completely over your head. Doing so creates a warmer pocket around the face, but it also directs every breath into the bedding. Over time, the wool and fur become damp. The moisture may freeze along the outer layers, reducing loft and making the coverings heavier. You keep your mouth and nose near the opening instead. A narrow passage allows breath to escape without flowing through the entire robe. The air entering your lungs remains painfully cold, but the insulation around your chest stays drier. A scarf can warm incoming air slightly and protect the skin, yet it must not become a block of ice. You rotate the cloth so the frozen patch moves away from your mouth. The drier portion covers your cheeks, while the icy section rests where body heat can soften it gradually. The frost in your beard has become thick enough to click softly when you move your jaw. You press the crystals between gloved fingers and break them away. Pulling them sharply could tear hair and skin, an outcome too ridiculous to explain with dignity. Condensation gathers on the inner surface of the buffalo hide where warm vapor reaches colder material. You slide a hand across it and feel a thin crust. The trapper lifts one edge briefly, allowing dry air to pass through. The robe is shaken lightly, dislodging frost without releasing all the warmth beneath it. This ventilation happens in short intervals. Open the bedding too long, and the warm chamber disappears. Keep it sealed without pause, and dampness accumulates. You learn to exchange a little heat now to preserve much more insulation later. Historians still argue whether written accounts accurately describe how often mountain men slept in badly dampened bedding, or whether experienced travellers were more disciplined about ventilation than popular stories suggest. Conditions varied enormously. A careful man with spare clothing and dry weather could manage moisture well. A soaked traveller in heavy snow might have no truly dry option at all. Drying gear on the body is another debated habit. A slightly damp shirt may dry safely beneath outer layers while you remain warm. A soaked garment can drain heat faster than the body replaces it. The difference depends on material, temperature, wind, food, fatigue, and available fire. You hold a damp strip of cloth against your abdomen beneath the coat. Heat begins moving into it, but you monitor yourself closely. If shivering increases or your core feels cooler, the cloth must come out. The body is not an unlimited drying machine. It is a living furnace with a very strict fuel budget. Food supports that furnace. You chew another small piece of dried meat and take a careful drink. Cold air is dry, and every breath carries moisture away from the body. You may not feel thirsty, yet dehydration reduces circulation and makes temperature regulation harder. The water is warm enough to drink comfortably, not hot enough to burn. Swallowing it brings a gentle heat through the chest. You keep the container covered so snow and ash do not enter. Spilled water would freeze quickly on clothing, bedding, or ground. A companion examines the inside of his coat sleeve. Frost has formed near the cuff where warm arm moisture met cold outer air. He scrapes it away before it melts and soaks inward. Removing frozen moisture while it remains ice is easier than drying the same amount of water later. You begin noticing these small frost lines everywhere, around collars, along mitten openings, near the tops of boots, at the edge of a cap. Each marks a boundary where warm vapor travels outward and meets cold. The trick is to let moisture continue moving away from the skin without allowing it to settle inside the insulating layers. Clothing that breathes supports this process. Layers that can be opened, closed, removed, and dried give the traveller control. Nothing remains perfect through the entire night. Socks dampen, scarves frost, robes collect crystals. The system works because you inspect it repeatedly and correct small problems early. Your dry mitten returns to your hand. The second one turns inside out near the warmth. Your boots remain flexible. The damp shirt at your back now feels almost neutral, and your toes rest inside clean wool. You settle deeper into the boughs, keeping your nose at the robe opening. Breath rises in pale clouds and drifts away instead of soaking the blankets. Frost still forms around your face, but the insulation surrounding your body remains lofty and dry enough to hold heat. The cold searches through every seam, carrying moisture toward the places where it can freeze. You answer with small adjustments, a loosened collar, a turned sock, a brushed cuff, a lifted robe. None looks heroic. That is exactly why it works. The darkness has reached its deepest point. When the fire seems smaller, the forest seems larger, and every sound carries farther than it should. You open your eyes without knowing what woke you. For several seconds, you remain still beneath the robe, listening. The coals give a faint ticking sound. A horse shifts among the trees. The dog raises its head, then lowers it again. No branch cracks nearby. No voice calls your name. Nothing appears wrong, yet the cold pressing against your back feels stronger. You flex your fingers. They move. You curl your toes. They move too, though slowly. This small inspection becomes more important than sleep. The hours before dawn often bring the lowest temperatures of the night because the ground has spent many hours releasing heat while the sun remains absent. Clear skies allow that heat to escape more efficiently, and calm hollows may become especially cold. The air feels dry and brittle, as if the whole valley has been left inside a freezer with the door firmly locked. You shift onto your other side and discover that the section of warmth near your legs has weakened. One heavy log has burned through, leaving a dark gap in the coal line. The firewatch sits nearby, shoulders hunched, fighting exhaustion. He notices you looking and pushes himself upright. The movement is slow, too slow. You ask him a simple question. He answers correctly, but his words come thickly. Fatigue may explain it, yet cold can also slow speech and thought. You slide from the bedding, keeping the robe around your shoulders, and help him place another log across the gap. The wood lands with a dull thud. Sparks lift, bright for a moment, then vanish. You use a green pole to roll the charred ends inward. Red light returns beneath the ash, and a thin flame begins working along the fresh surface. The firewatch rubs his arms and stamps his feet. His motions look clumsy, so you tell him to sit closer while you take over. Pride offers a brief protest. Common sense wins, mostly because common sense currently has warmer mittens. You remain standing for a minute, allowing the muscles in your legs to work. Blood moves more strongly through your thighs and calves. The warmth feels good, but you avoid vigorous exercise. Heavy effort would create sweat, and exhaustion is already waiting nearby with the patience of a tax collector. The man settles near the center of the sleeping row. His companions pull the robe around him and check his face. He begins shivering more strongly, which is unpleasant but useful. His body is still attempting to create heat. You watch the fire and listen to his breathing. Gradually, the rhythm steadies. His answers become sharper. No one celebrates. In severe cold, success often looks like a problem quietly becoming less serious. The coal bed needs rebuilding, not merely feeding. You pull glowing fragments together with a pole, creating a continuous band of heat. Ash lies thick over some sections. A thin layer protects the coals and slows their burning, but too much can smother them. You stir only enough to expose red surfaces and admit air. Fresh fuel goes on in stages. A medium split catches more readily than a massive frozen log. Once its edges burn, the heavier piece can follow. You arrange the wood so it rests firmly and cannot roll toward the bedding. The flames rise, then settle. Heat begins crossing the snow again. Your face warms first. The skin tingles. You turn slightly so one cheek does not receive all the heat. A trapper who falls asleep too close to a revived blaze can scorch clothing or skin before waking. The body may be cold overall while one exposed area becomes dangerously hot. You inspect the sleeping row. One man's robe has slipped from his shoulder. You pull it into place. Another has extended one hand beyond the blankets. The fingers look pale under the firelight. You tuck the hand gently against his chest. He wakes and complains. Good. Complaining remains a highly advanced sign of life. The dog stands and stretches, back arched, front paws extended. It walks a circle around the bedding, sniffing the air. Frost clings to the tips of its whiskers. After checking the darkness, it lies against the newly covered hand as if assigned to the task. Your own knees stiffen while you stand watch. You bend them carefully and roll your shoulders. Muscles cool quickly when held still. Small movements maintain circulation without consuming too much energy. The cold also affects judgment. Simple tasks require more concentration. A knot that would take seconds in daylight becomes a puzzle. A dropped mitten becomes a crisis. A forgotten tool can vanish beneath powder. You force yourself to complete one action before beginning another. Place the log. Return the pole. Close the mitten. Check the sparks. The sequence prevents confusion. Hypothermia develops when the body loses heat faster than it can produce it. Early signs may include intense shivering, poor coordination, fatigue, and confusion. As cooling becomes severe, shivering can weaken or stop, which is not improvement. It may mean the body is losing the ability to defend itself. You remember this while watching every companion? The quietest person receives the closest inspection. A man who insists he feels pleasantly warm while everyone else is freezing may be in danger. Confusion can create false comfort, poor decisions, and resistance to help. One sleeper suddenly begins unfastening his coat. You catch his wrist and ask what he is doing. He blinks at you, then says he feels too hot. The skin of his face is cold, and his movements are unsteady. You stop him from opening the coat further. His companions wake at once and pull him toward the warm center. Dry coverings gather around his torso. A warm drink is prepared in small sips, provided he remains alert enough to swallow. The strange urge to remove clothing during severe hypothermia is known as paradoxical undressing. It may occur when failing blood vessel control creates a sudden sensation of heat. Not every cold person experiences it, but the possibility is frightening because the victim may actively remove the protection, keeping him alive. You speak to him calmly. Loud alarm would waste energy and increase confusion. You ask his name, the location of the horses, and what he ate. His first answers are slow. The later ones become clearer. The group warms his chest, neck, and head rather than concentrating intense heat on hands and feet. Rapidly heating the limbs can send cold blood back toward the heart. Gentle, controlled warming of the body's core is safer. Historians still argue whether frontier accounts of men recovering from severe cold accurately describe hypothermia or combine several conditions under vague terms such as freezing, exposure, and exhaustion. Writers often lack modern medical language, so descriptions must be interpreted from behavior, weather, and outcome. A diary may say that a traveler becomes sleepy, foolish, or unable to continue. Those simple words can conceal a dangerous decline. Mountain men do not need medical textbooks to recognize that a companion who stumbles, mumbles, and stops shivering requires immediate care. The affected man begins trembling again. His expression sharpens, and irritation returns when someone asks the same question twice. Excellent. The camp now contains 2 healthy complainers, a promising recovery rate. You remain watchful. Rewarming takes time, and improvement can reverse if the fire weakens or coverings open. The men keep him awake with a low conversation. The dog rests across his feet, contributing warmth without requesting formal recognition. A quirky practice among some cold weather travelers involves placing warmed stones near the feet or torso. The stones must be dry, heated gradually, wrapped in cloth, and kept far below scorching temperature. A stone drawn from wet ground may crack when heated, while an unwrapped hot stone can burn numb skin. You choose a small dry rock from beside the fire platform. It has warmed slowly rather than sitting in the flames. You wrap it in thick wool and test it against your own wrist. The heat feels mild. The bundle rests near the chilled man's torso, where it provides steady warmth without direct contact. No one uses snow to warm frozen skin. No one rubs pale fingers harshly. Friction may damage tissues that are already vulnerable. Gentle protection and gradual warming remain the rule. The night seems unwilling to move. You look toward the eastern trees and find only darkness. Time stretches strangely when you're cold and tired. 10 minutes can feel like an hour, while an hour disappears inside a brief doze. To remain alert, you count fuel pieces and estimate how long each will burn. 2 medium logs wait beside the heavy stack. Kindling remains dry. The coal bed now glows evenly. You have enough to reach daylight, provided nothing is wasted. A faint wind begins moving through the trees. It is not strong, but it carries colder air down the slope. Smoke bends toward the sleeping row. You adjust the outer log and shift a small barrier, guiding the current upward. The horses respond first. They turn together, hindquarters toward the breeze. Their coats ripple slightly. One stamps a hoof, breaking the crust beneath it. The animals remain calm, which reassures you that the wind is ordinary rather than the leading edge of a violent storm. Snow squeaks beneath your boots as you walk the camp boundary. You inspect tether lines, fuel stacks, and the path to water. Frost covers everything beyond the heated circle. The world appears silver where faint starlight reaches it and black where the trees stand thickest. Your breath freezes along your scarf. You rotate the cloth again and return to the fire. The chilled man now speaks normally. His shivering has eased without disappearing completely. He asks for food. Another good sign. A small portion of dried meat and fat gives his body fuel. He chews slowly beneath the robe. You take a bite as well. Fat provides dense energy, valuable when the body must produce heat through long winter hours. Historical trapping diets often rely heavily on meat, especially when plant foods are scarce. Such diets vary by region, season, trade access, and relationships with indigenous suppliers. The richness coats your mouth. It is not elegant, but it feels substantial. Your body accepts it with more gratitude than your tongue expresses. The eastern darkness finally changes. At first, you suspect imagination. Then the black between the trunks becomes deep blue. Tree shapes separate from one another. The stars nearest the horizon begin fading. The temperature may remain bitter even as light returns. Dawn does not immediately bring warmth. It merely makes the cold visible. You add the final heavy log and watch flame travel along its split edge. The camp begins stirring. One sleeper flexes his ankles beneath the robe. Another sits up slowly, keeping wool wrapped around his shoulders. The dog shakes frost from its coat and looks offended by morning. You check your fingers, toes, ears, and nose. Every part answers. Stiffness remains, but sensation is clear. Around you, companions perform the same quiet inventory. The deepest hours have not been conquered through one grand act. They pass because you notice a weak fire, a pale hand, a confused answer, a slipping robe, and a man opening his coat when he should not. Each correction is small. Together, they carry everyone toward the blue light gathering among the trees. The blue light strengthens until every trunk, branch, and drift separates from the darkness. Snow covers the camp in a thin new layer, smoothing footprints and softening the hard edges of equipment. The world looks clean, silent, and almost gentle, which is a remarkable performance from a landscape that has spent the night attempting to freeze everyone solid. You sit upright beneath the buffalo robe. Cold air slips immediately around your neck, and the warmth stored beneath the coverings begins escaping. Your body protests this change with stiff shoulders, reluctant knees, and a strong desire to declare dawn an optional event. The trapper does not rise all at once. He flexes his fingers, rolls his ankles, and bends each knee beneath the robe. Muscles and joints that have remained still in severe cold need gradual movement. A sudden attempt to stand can produce dizziness, cramping, or an undignified collapse into the nearest woodpile. You follow his example. Toes press against loosened footwear. Fingers open and close inside warm mittens. Your neck turns slowly from side to side. Sensation remains clear, though every joint feels filled with cold sand. One companion sits beside you, still wrapped from head to boots. Frost covers his beard so heavily that his mouth seems hidden behind a small white fence. He tries to speak, but the crystals hold several hairs together. The dog watches him struggle, apparently delighted that humans have invented grooming problems. He softens the frost with warm fingers and breaks it away gradually. Pulling hard would tear skin or hair. Small pieces fall onto the robe, sparkling briefly before disappearing among the buffalo hair. You slide from the bedding and stand carefully. The snow beneath your boots squeaks. Your legs tremble for several breaths, then grow steadier as circulation increases. You keep the blanket around your shoulders while approaching the fire. The long logs have collapsed inward. Ash covers most of the coal bed, but narrow red lines remain beneath the grey surface. The fire appears nearly dead until the trapper kneels and moves the ash with a green stick. A deep orange glow opens beneath it. He gathers the surviving coals into a compact mound. Dry bark and resinous shavings rest above them, followed by thin twigs. You crouch near the edge and blow gently. Ash swirls away. Smoke rises, and a single flame curls through the bark. The flame catches the twigs. Their tips blacken, glow, and begin snapping. Finger-thick wood follows. Within minutes, the camp's faint red pulse becomes a bright morning fire. Reviving embers saves both time and tinder. A well-managed coal bed can survive for hours beneath protective ash, even when visible flame disappears. Travellers who expect to remain in one place may bury strong coals lightly before sleeping, then uncover them when heat is needed. The ash acts as insulation, slowing combustion and shielding the hottest material from cold air. Too much ash can suffocate the coals, but a thin covering preserves them. You begin to appreciate that yesterday's fire has not vanished. It has merely been sleeping more efficiently than you have. A metal cup rests near the warmth, filled with snow. The first handful melts into a surprisingly small amount of water. Fresh snow contains considerable air, so several packed cups may produce only 1 cup of liquid. The process continues until enough water warms for drinking and cooking. You add snow gradually. Filling the vessel completely can scorch the small amount melting at the bottom before the upper snow collapses. A little water is kept in the cup, then more snow is stirred into it. The method produces water faster and protects the container. No yellow snow enters the cup. This is frontier science at its most advanced. The warm drink passes from hand to hand. It contains no luxury beyond heat, yet it feels richer than anything served beneath a painted ceiling. Steam touches your face. The first swallow warms your mouth, throat, and chest, then seems to spread outward through your coat. Breakfast is plain and dense. Dried meat softens near the fire. Fat melts into a small cooking vessel, adding energy and flavour. Flour, cornmeal, or other provisions may be available depending on trade and supply. But winter travel often rewards food that stores well and requires little preparation. The men eat without hurry. Chewing warms stiff jaws, and the meal gives the body fuel for the work of breaking camp. No one begins heavy labour while empty and chilled. A person who rushes into activity may sweat quickly, then cool as soon as the load is lifted. The horses receive attention before the camp is packed. You approach calmly, speaking so they recognize you through the pale morning. Frost whitens their backs and manes. Their breath rises in thick clouds, and small icicles hang beneath one animal's jaw. You inspect legs, hooves, and tether lines. Ice packed beneath a hoof can form an uneven ball, making each step unstable. A wooden tool removes it carefully. Metal is used cautiously because a sharp edge can injure the hoof or become painfully cold against bare fingers. The animals receive water and feed where possible. Snow alone does not always provide enough hydration because melting it inside the body requires energy. Horses may eat snow, but access to liquid water is valuable when it can be provided safely. One mule refuses its portion and turns away with theatrical disappointment. It has apparently reviewed the breakfast menu and found the service unacceptable. The trapper checks its mouth, breathing, and belly. The animal shows no sign of illness. After several minutes, it begins eating with the same enthusiasm it had denied possessing. Mules, like certain human companions, sometimes require an audience before cooperating. Your footwear waits near the rekindled heat. The leather remains flexible, though frost has formed along the outer seams. You rub the boots gently, bending the soles and working each lace free. They are warm enough to wear, but never hot enough to damage. Dry socks return to your feet. Damp pairs have lost much of their moisture, though they are not entirely dry. They are tied outside a pack where air can reach them during travel. Wet items never disappear into the centre of a bundle, where they would soak blankets and freeze into hidden lumps. Moccasins, stockings, mittens, and scarves receive the same inspection. Ice is brushed away before it can melt. Seams are checked. Small tears are repaired while fingers remain warm enough to work. A quirky frontier habit involves tucking stiff leather beneath clothing so body heat softens it, while other tasks continue. The arrangement may place a frozen strap beneath an armpit or against the belly, producing warmth and a powerful reminder that comfort is a flexible concept. The bough beds are lifted and shaken. Frost falls from their lower branches. The spruce tips are flattened beneath body weight, yet the bark beneath remains mostly dry. Needles cling to wool blankets and fur, so everyone spends several minutes brushing them away. One needle has somehow entered your sleeve, travelled to your elbow, and established a permanent settlement. You remove it with the seriousness of a surgeon. Blankets are not rolled immediately. They hang briefly across a line or low branches where morning air and gentle fire warmth can carry away trapped moisture. The buffalo robe receives the same treatment, skin side turned toward the faint breeze. Direct sunlight has not yet reached the camp, but growing daylight reveals pale frost along folds and edges. You beat the robe lightly with a smooth stick. Frozen crystals break free without crushing the fur. The sleeping platform is dismantled rather than abandoned as a thick mound. Boughs scatter loosely across the forest floor. Bark panels return beside fallen wood. This reduces the obvious mark of the camp and prevents one wet pile from smothering the ground beneath it. The fire continues burning while equipment dries, but its size is reduced. No additional heavy log goes on. The remaining fuel must burn down far enough to extinguish safely. Mountain men of the Rocky Mountain fur trade become famous during the 1820s and 1830s, when demand for beaver felt drives trapping deep into western watersheds. By the 1840s, changing hat fashions, depleted beaver populations in some regions, and new economic opportunities weaken the classic rendezvous era. The image of the mountain man survives far longer than the system that supports him. Paintings, memoirs, novels, and later films turn practical labourers into symbols of complete independence. Yet the real wilderness economy depends on trade networks, company supplies, indigenous knowledge, animal labour, and cooperation between companions. Historians still argue whether mountain men deserve their legendary reputation as unmatched winter survivors, or whether the legend hides how often they depend on native guides. native clothing technologies, shared camps, and simple good fortune. The men who leave memoirs are also the men who survive long enough to tell their stories. Frozen mistakes rarely write autobiographies. You look across the camp and see evidence of that dependence everywhere. Wool arrives through distant trade. The robe reflects expert hide preparation. Moccasin design comes from indigenous traditions, food, roots, trapping techniques, and knowledge of local plants often pass through cultural exchange. Survival is not the invention of one heroic man. It is accumulated knowledge carried by many people, shaped across generations, and adapted by whoever is humble enough to learn. The packs are assembled carefully. Dry blankets sit inside protective wraps. Damp clothing remains accessible. Heavy tools ride low and balanced. Powder and ammunition stay dry. Food is sealed away from animals. Each strap receives a pull. A loose load can shift on a steep slope, injuring an animal or scattering equipment into deep snow. The trapper walks around every pack twice, checking both sides. You do the same and find one buckle turn beneath a strap. Correcting it now takes seconds. Ignoring it could rub the horse raw over several miles. Small details continue ruling the day. The fire has settled into glowing fragments. You separate the coals with a stick, spreading them across the prepared ground so they cool more quickly. Snow goes on gradually. Steam rises with a sharp hiss. You stir the wet ash and expose hidden red points. More snow follows. The process repeats until no glow remains, and no heat rises against your bare palm held safely above the surface. A winter fire can smoulder beneath ash or inside rotten wood. Leaving it unattended risks reignition when wind returns. You check nearby bark, roots, and the green platform beneath the fire. Every piece feels cold. The melted area is covered lightly with snow, not to hide hot coals, but to restore a level surface after confirming that the heat is gone. The camp no longer has a glowing centre. Daylight must serve that purpose now. Sun finally touches the upper branches. Snow crystals flare gold, then white. The light travels downward until it reaches the horses, the packs, and your frost-marked coat. You lift the final bundle onto your shoulder. The weight feels familiar. Muscles complain, but they also feel alive. Every finger works. Every toe answers. The companions stand ready, and the dog circles the group, impatient to begin moving. You turn toward the white trail leading deeper among the trees. The night leaves no medal, no grand announcement, and no promise that the next camp will be easier. It leaves knowledge. You understand where cold gathers, how warmth escapes, why dry layers matter, and how quickly exhaustion can cloud judgment. You understand that fire must be built patiently, bedding must rise above the ground, and companionship can hold danger at a distance. Most of all, you understand that sleeping through -30 does not mean defeating the cold, it means respecting it through every quiet decision until daylight returns. The trail softens beneath new sunlight, and your steps become slower in the gentle white morning. The hard edge of night begins to fade. Smoke no longer stings your eyes. Frost loosens from the branches and falls in tiny, quiet showers. Each crystal catches the light, shines for a moment, then settles without sound. You breathe steadily, in, out. The cold air touches your face, but it no longer feels like an enemy. It is simply part of the wide mountain stillness, moving through the trees and resting over the snow. Your companions walk nearby. Their footsteps form a calm rhythm. The horses follow with soft creaks of leather and low clouds of breath. The dog moves ahead, pauses, and looks back, making sure the little group remains together. Nothing needs to hurry now. The forest opens toward Pale Valley. Sunlight spreads across distant ridges, turning them silver, then gold. Behind you, the campsite disappears among trunks and shadows. The boughs settle. The snow smooths its surface. The wilderness quietly keeps its own memory. Your shoulders feel warm beneath wool. Your feet remain dry. Your hands rest easily around the straps. Every lesson of the night travels with you, not as fear, but as a calm awareness. You know that warmth can begin with one ember. Shelter can begin with one tree. Safety can begin with one companion noticing that you are cold. The mountains remain vast, but you do not need to hold their entire weight. You only take one careful step, then another. The white trail stretches onward beneath a soft blue sky. Wind passes lightly through the spruce tops, almost like distant breathing. Your eyelids grow heavy. The footsteps fade. The valley brightens, then softens, and you continue into the quiet morning, warm enough, safe enough, carried gently by the rhythm of snow, breath, and light.